in this interview, I have Conor Delvin from DeFi joining me to talk all about the project. He talks about DeFi itself along with Occam and how they're bridging the Ethereum ecosystem over to Cardano and doing some really cool things there. They also have a MVP demo, a minimum viable product version 2 out. You can see more about that in the show notes in the links down below, so you can check out the actual working demo of the platform working. Now, if you enjoy this type of content, please make sure you give us that thumbs up, click subscribe and hit the notification bell, and you hear more from us real soon.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast.
So Conor, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into crypto and how you got into Cardano specifically, or how you found the Cardano project?
Yes, so I am I'm a young guy, I'm only 23. I came into the space in 2017, and I was still in college at the time, and I had a lot going on in my plate in college. And so I didn't have too much time to focus on cryptocurrencies. I kind of played around. I lost money in Verge, XVG, if anybody remembers that. I didn't really know what I was doing too much. And then I lost a bit of money with Ethereum, but I was just like, oh, this is kind of interesting, moving money around, and didn't really think too much of it. And then I was slowly coming out of university. My last 2 semesters were spring and the previous fall of 2020. And so I started to find myself with a lot more time on my hands as I was transitioning into a different job. And I started to really get heavy into researching, and then made my way into Cardano because of the research papers and all the academic material that was out on it. Because I was already coming from an academic background. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. I have a bachelor's of science in electrical engineering. And so going from reading a lot of the academic papers that are in the space of electrical engineering to reading Cardano papers, and a lot of the papers that were coming out of IOHK, Emurgo, and all those guys, just seemed like a natural transition, and it was really interesting to kind of dive into. And so I kind of contrasted that with other projects in the space, Ethereum, other guys, and I didn't necessarily see the same amount of academic rigor coming out of them. And so I felt much more comfortable entering into the Cardano ecosystem and, putting a lot of my chips into that project, because it just seemed like a more long-lasting solution and a more tried approach to the problems that they're trying to solve. So,
yeah, definitely. I don't see any point of rushing through and just being first to market, especially when you can get hacked and and lose other people's money. It's very concerning that you're trying to revolutionize finance, but you're making not on purpose, making ways for hackers to get through and steal all that money as well. So can you give us an overview of DeFire, this project that has just appeared on my radar? And can you tell us a little bit about your role there as well?
Yes. So if you navigate over to the website, DeFire, DEFIRE.fi, that's kind of going to be, you're going to see a giant splash page, which has Optimal Hub for on-chain execution, which is a nice collection of words. And those words do mean something. And so the best way to think of it as you have a bunch of different sources to purchase from. And so you're thinking, okay, I'm going to purchase product A from, service provider XYZ 1, 2, 3. So there's multiple different service providers, and you're thinking, okay, I want to get the best price, the most bang for your buck. You're going to use DeFire as the smart router to kind of route your transaction to figure out which one has the best pricing. Think of it as Amazon, whole host of different assets that are all essentially the same. There's some, listing of all of them, and you can kind of choose which one. DeFire is going to essentially eliminate the necessary need for choice and say, okay, we have DEXes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 offering asset A, and DeFire says, okay, DEX 4 has the best liquidity pricing ratio for you to get the most amount out of your swap. And so that's what DeFire is, and which is really interesting, because if we're keeping up with the space of projects that are being announced and potentially coming to Cardano. I know I did a video for the DeFire YouTube channel, and I think I counted about 14 DEXes that were potentially coming to Cardano, which is, especially for us at DeFire, a very interesting notion. We don't necessarily know how liquidity is going to be spread out amongst all those DEXes, but the thing is, if we have 14 different venues, 14 more venues to kind of choose from, that's a lot of options. And so DeFire would fit nicely as like a glue for the ecosystem, because we certainly want to be advocates of decentralization. I mean, if Uniswap is nice on Ethereum because, it's been successful, but at the same time, it's kind of stifled innovation. You essentially just have derivatives that are copies of its code. And if you have lots of different DEXs that are all independent and developing potentially innovative products for each of their DEXs, that is even better. And as DeFire, if we can, facilitate transactions to happen across all those different DEXs and kind of bring them all together to make them all under one hub for ease of execution for someone who just wants to say, hey, I just want to come on, just swap asset A. They're going to just easily be able to walk over to DeFire, swap that asset and get it done with. But at the same time, they have the opportunity to go deeper and, traverse into those DEXs and figure out what those DEXs best have to offer them, their communities, whatever products. And we kind of hope that facilitation happens and we can kind of more steer people into that way. So I would like to think that DeFire potentially is a gateway into the deeper DEX space of Cardano, because you're not going to, I hope you're not necessarily going to, see just one dominant player in the space, because that runs counter to the whole narrative of decentralization that we're trying to go after. So. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that explanation. I've been trying to work out how to explain DeFire in nice consolidated explanation that you did then. Like you said, the wording on the website doesn't really it doesn't explain a whole lot out of it. But thank you so much for that. Now, this project came all about from what I read from an IDO from another project called Occam Razor, which is like a accelerator or a starting point for a lot of these different projects. Can you explain to the audience a little bit about that, what Occam is and how this project spawned from it?
Yes. So so Project Catalyst is something that Cardano has to kind of allow communities to kind of bring forth products, ideas, proposals, things like that. And just the same as Occam is like a launch pad where people can, companies, groups of people can put together products, and we can provide funding, networking, and launching of those products and services. And so Occam is really interesting because through the kind of accelerator, and then more importantly, their networks and their connections to a bunch of different people across Emurgo, IOHK, and a bunch of different VCs and a lot of software companies. There's a lot of tooling and resources that are pretty much ready to be utilized and funding that is able to exist for people. And so you can pretty much go, hey, I have this idea, I have this white paper, whatever, that I want to implement into the Cardano ecosystem. And you can submit that through Occam, and then if it's good enough, it'll go through a bunch of different testing. You'll be talking to a lot of different people throughout the Occam organization, and then they'll, from there, put together a nice team, get funding secured for you, and then move forward through the launchpad process into the actual investment rounds. You'll have private investment rounds through people that own the Occam token. I think it's OCC. So you're staking that token, and depending on the amount, you are allocated different amounts to get involved in these private seed investments. And so then you can, invest however much you want based on that maximum limit, based on how much OCC tokens you're staking. And then from there, the project then goes and does the actual IDO, which is the DEX offering, where they'll be offered on the DEX. As of right now, a lot of the projects that are going through are being offered on Uniswap because we're just waiting for Alonzo to come on. But in the future, once the smart contracts are live, the progression is then to move on to the actual Occam DEX, which is what we're kind of developing. So that'll be the in-house DEX. And so products can then launch on that. So I like Occam purely because it is facilitating companies and people to get involved and to put ideas out into the space, because I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know, it's like the startup percentage ratio. So many startups are going to fail. Some of them are going to stick. And it's important that we do try to get as many things to stick as possible to really provide that innovation into the space and to kind of make Cardano the leading blockchain to kind of go to in the future.
All right, brilliant. So now I understand what Occam is. Thank you. Another explanation done. All right, so you guys went through that entire process, came out the end successful. So I'm assuming you have quite a bit of, or a decent amount of funding at least. Yes. to go through. Okay, great. Now it's all done on Ethereum at the moment, and that's the thing that really confused me. Like, I swear earlier in the year, I thought I saw some heat that Occam was getting in regards to doing this all on the Ethereum blockchain and not waiting to do it on Cardano. Am I right here? Can you explain what happened? Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that was something that I kind of encountered within the DeFire Telegrams community, within Occam as well. And I completely understand that, because I know for me it was fairly cost prohibitive to do a lot of transactions. And even now it's like, do I really want to spend $20, $30 if I'm trying to like dollar cost average into a token? Not necessarily. But the thinking is that, hey, we have this idea, we have this visualization of a concept being Occam Razor. Let's just get this thing built so we can figure out a lot of the stepping stones and a lot of the obstacles that we're going to have to kind of deal with and solve. And if we can get this done on Ethereum, then certainly while Haskell does bring in an elevated level of challenges because it's a much more complex language to kind of wrap your head around, we still have a lot of the talent pool and of a lot of different Haskell guys to pull from within the internal development team. And so the transition from a Solidity on Ethereum to Haskell and Cardano shouldn't be too much of an issue, because at the end of the day, it's still the front and back end is still fairly similar. I think the only thing that's really going to change is the internal Haskell smart contracting. And so the idea to go on Ethereum, and while people are going to, disagree with that, I completely understand them. Some people don't even want to deal with Ethereum. Completely understand it. We just wanted to say, hey, we have this product that we actually are able to have working, that we are going to bring to the fore. And if we're able to start migrating people over from Ethereum to Cardano, even better, because now we've come out with our Ethereum to Cardano bridge. And that was actually really interesting, because I sent Cardano for my dataless over the bridge, and I've wrapped ADA in my MetaMask, which is a really interesting thing that I now see. And so we already have the infrastructure in place now with that. And so at this point, it's more of an issue of just waiting for Alonso to come out, because now we have the token bridge for ERC20 to ADA, or ADA to or CNT to ADA, ERC20, and companies, people are going to be able to migrate their tokens, their OCC, their DeFire tokens, whichever, over the bridge and to Cardano native tokens. So
that's really cool. I think you're the one of the first projects that has mentioned that you've been able to bridge something over. So other projects that I've been speaking to have been waiting for what IOG I've been working on in regards to the bridge. So once they get their hands on the source code there, then they'll start bridging in other certain assets from Ethereum over to Cardano. But you guys seem to have at least gotten the Ethereum side of things working. Yeah. And hopefully you can port the rest over as soon as smart contracts get released. So it sounds very similar. Occam sounds very similar to CardStarter, something that was released on the Ethereum blockchain. But from what I've heard, they've decided to hand the reins over development over to the SundaySwap team. If I am correct. So that's a very interesting partnership they did there, and they just went, forget all the Ethereum stuff, let's give it all over to SundaySwap and let them deal with all the Haskell developing. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, now, definitely.
Now, I also saw a news article or a blog post from Emurgo in regards to your partnership, Occam and the Emurgo partnership. Is that what's the story behind that sort of partnership there?
Yeah, so we have a lot of guys that are previously worked at IOHK, previously worked at Emurgo, and a lot of the Cardano companies that are in that area, and they came over to Occam. And so it's more of facilitating a public partnership to say, hey, we are being backed by obviously providing funding to us, but at the same time trying to provide the ethical foundation of a lot of the things that we're doing, because I feel like that is probably one of the most important things for me and a lot of the guys at DeFire and Occam, is to be completely in line ethically and philosophically with what Cardano is doing. And so that round of funding and the announcements, well, certainly the cash infusion is much appreciated, because that allows us to onboard even more developers and kind of help expand the network for all the projects that we're developing. I think it's more important to show the community and a lot of the Cardano people that were, questioning us, hey, why are you developing on Ethereum? And a lot of those guys who had their reservations, to say, hey, we do have, the ideological kind of backing of the Cardano overhead, and that we are still following that narrative, and at the end goal is very similar to exactly what Cardano is doing. So while we may take some steps that people may question, may have reservations about building on Ethereum, that at the end of the day, they're just steps that we're trying to take in order to facilitate total migration over to Cardano and the long-term survivability of the Cardano ecosystem.
Okay, understood. I could also see, because you guys have a lot of experience in building in Ethereum Solidity in general, that you could help a lot of other projects on the Ethereum blockchain move over to Cardano as well. So
yes.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Overall, it's a good thing. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about DeFire in general and this smart routing that you guys have. So we have a good explanation now that it's essentially going to look for the best possible price for whatever you are wanting to swap in the protocol. How is this user experience going to play out? Like what are people going to see? Is it something very familiar that they have already experienced already? And how are you actually going to talk to all these different DEXes?
Yeah, so to answer the first question of what it's going to look like, I think the current mindset is to have two different, like a simple and advanced layout, like you said, with Coinbase and how that kind of works. You have the Coinbase kind of app, which is just like a simple buy and sell, nice and like an easy binary, relatively simple thing, has all the pairs, all that. And then you have Coinbase Pro, which is more web page based and on the actual internet, not on the app. That is much more advanced, provides a lot more information, utilities for you to access. And that's kind of what we're thinking now with DeFire. We have the simple swap, which is, hey, I'm trying to swap, ADA for asset B, and it's just going to say, here's the actual ratios of what you're getting. This is the price and kind of where the sourcing is coming from. Just super simple, straightforward. And then we'll have the secondary option of, hey, you can go to the advanced swap, and then you'll be, okay, I'm going to swap ADA for asset B. It's going to provide different graphs based on what you're looking for, liquidity volume, to pricing across different DEXes, breakdowns of how that pricing has worked, fee breakdowns, lots of different information and more detailed analytics of the actual swap. So you have the more simple, just straightforward, like I know what I want to do, get in and out, be done with it in less than a minute, or I want to, be a little bit more conscious of the decisions that I'm making and kind of where I'm pulling from. And that's kind of what we're exploring on our end with how we're partnering with DEXes, and kind of we have to wait for liquidity to see how liquidity plays out, because I think what we're going to notice is that certain DEXes are going to have liquidity in certain tokens much more than other DEXes. And so at that point, then we can kind of look towards partnerships based on whichever one tends to have more often than not the most efficient liquidity. And that's kind of things that we are looking at in the background as kind of business and partnership on our end. And then the question of how are we actually accessing all this information is roughly the same as it's done in Ethereum. So Ethereum, what happens is you have all of our main internal smart contracts, but then you have the actual code handlers that go out and interface with Uniswap, with Bancor, with Balancer, with all those guys. It's just the same as you would have in Cardano with, say, Sunday Swap, Min Swap, ViFi, Maladex, all these guys, Occam DEX, we would essentially just have little code handlers that are dealing with the direct price feeds for all those and gathering all the information from those DEXes for each asset and then feeding it back into the main contract for whatever asset is, say asset A to asset B. So does that make sense?
Yeah, totally does. So the experience, the users will actually see what DEX their trade is potentially going on. Is that right? So visually see it in the interface. Okay, that's really cool. So
we're looking we're looking at just seeing how we can format how the DEXs are, because there's a lot of useful information that people can look at depending on what DEXs, hey, what time is, if DEX A is potentially getting, different order routed or orders through it at certain times of the day, depending on volume, depending on volatility. There's a lot of interesting analytics that we have access to as once all this goes live. And so we're just kind of seeing how the DEX space evolves at this rate. So,
okay. And like you said, there is 14 of them, and liquidity is definitely going to be a problem. I'm assuming you can tap in and see exactly how much liquidity is across all these different DEXs and provide the best transfer.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, in terms of fees, all these other DEXs have their own fees. So if you're doing a swap and it's going to MinSwap, for example, they're going to have their fees within their own swap as well. And I'm assuming you guys also have a fee for your swap when you're doing a trade as well. So I'm assuming, from what you explained, the user will be able to see all these different fees that come into play. And so how does that work? Like, you're going to handle all of that and then just give one price feed back to the user as a one simple price?
Basically, and that's kind of how the actual DeFire token CWAP kind of comes into play, because if you're thinking about it, you have 14 different DEXs to choose from. All of them have their, like you said, their different, fees and their variable ratio. And then potentially we have our fees that are coming in. But the way that we're looking at it, and that's to utilize the CWAP token, is to use that as more of a referral mechanism and staking mechanism, because depending on the amount of tokens that are staked, orders are going to be routed accordingly because of that. And so that is more of us working in talks with the DEXs and trying to figuring that out, because the way we have it in our minds is, okay, if we have the token staked by a certain DEX, or different amounts of buy-in volume from those DEXs, then depending on how that works out, we get to route those orders through them and bypass the fees kind of in its entirety. And so that's more of a partnership and more of a intermediary between those DEXs. But the way that we would approach it, I think, would necessarily eliminate the fees. And at the same time, the way that we're structured, collecting all of the different DEXs and selecting the swap based on which asset is the cheapest would, make the fees, if anything, seem rather minimal in comparison to potentially what they would be paying. So,
gotcha. Okay, very smart. So these partnerships are going to be fairly important. So what other partnerships have you formed? And I also saw on the website a mention of a name, Changelly. Yes. Changelly has been around for a long time in the crypto space and pretty well trusted. What partnerships are you forming at the moment in the Cardano ecosystem, especially with other DEXs? And what is the partnership with Changelly?
Yes, so we'll talk about Changelly and some of our current partners right now. So Changelly is interesting, business to business. Their API is kind of where we're drawing a fair amount of our inspiration from, and a fair amount of the technical help as well. We do have access to their developing teams, or their developer teams, and our developers are working kind of hand in hand with them and bouncing ideas off back and forth, trying to solve a lot of the issues that we're encountering. And the thinking is the way that Changelly has inserted itself as an intermediary between a lot of centralized exchanges, that's kind of the avenue of approach that we are taking, kind of inserting ourselves as an intermediary between a lot of the current DEXs that are going to be coming out. And kind of that's what we're showing off with our minimum viable product with that proof of concept. And so that's why we're kind of building on Ethereum to show you that, hey, we do have the technical skills and know-how to be the intermediaries on the Ethereum DEXs, just the same as we're going to be the intermediaries on the Cardano DEXes whenever they do come out after Alonzo. And then going from there, Bitcoin.com exchange, they are helping a lot with the token bridge. They worked with us and with Occam as well to facilitate the actual working of the code from ERC20 to CNT and CNT to ERC20. We're still working kind of behind the scenes to figure out how we are formulating rewards for transferring of ADA and ADA assets, because think if you're this was brought up, and this is a completely valid point. If you're transferring from your dataless to your MetaMask, you're not necessarily selling off your ADA tokens because you may just put them on your MetaMask for use of another reason. And so, what are those tokens going to do? Are we going to stake them? Because say I move 10,000 ADA into my MetaMask, that's 10,000 ADA that could be collecting 5% APY. And so we're kind of looking at that currently with Bitcoin.com exchange and Occam to try to figure out how we're going to approach staking rewards and potentially giving rewards back, because we don't, while it's certainly good to get the exact amount back that you transferred in and out, maybe it would be better to see if we could, give actual rewards or get some sort of stake pool set up to say, hey, while your tokens were locked up for a month, 2 months on the bridge, they collected this amount of ADA. I think that'd be really interesting. And then partnership-wise with the other companies, we're actually looking at, there's a lot of things that we can pull from. I got off a call a little bit ago with another project that was looking at doing stable coins and stablecoin DEXes and using those as as trading pairs, which is going to be really helpful, especially if we're trying to do on-ramp, off-ramps for fiat. And I know we're looking, Card Wallet is another Occam ecosystem, or another product within the Occam ecosystem that is being developed, just like Yoroi and Giro Wallet and all those other guys. And so working with them seems like a really easy thing, because we are trying to figure out the fiat on and off ramps, and if we want to have one on DeFire, if we want to have an access gateway for someone to deposit whatever native fiat currency they have onto DeFire. But we could easily source that to something like Card Wallet or another product. And that's currently what I've been inundated with right now, is just partnerships and talking around and getting to know people. But we would love definitely to start working on physical and actual real-time partnerships with all these DEXs that are going to be coming out. But I think at the end of the day, at the most basis case is, hey, we are able to be interface with their code regardless kind of the relationship with all these DEXs. But through my efforts and the team's efforts, the goal is to have this best relationship as possible, because their long-term success is our long-term success.
Yeah, most definitely. There's some really cool, interesting things that you just brought up then. The staking of your ADA while it's locked up, being transferred over to a wrapped ERC20 token. That is a very cool concept. So you could be over there doing whatever it is, buying, selling, and then coming back and then trading back to the ADA ecosystem and then collecting your rewards on the way. Is that what you're thinking about?
That's what we're trying to figure out, is because we're gonna get however much ADA is transferred over from the Cardano space over to Ethereum or to potentially other chains as we go on down the road. But initially with the Cardano to the Ethereum space, we're just trying to figure out the internal mechanics to make it such that people are going to be able to collect potentially a reward and get their stake data back, as well as whatever they may have received from staking if they were staking to a stake pool. And then that kind of opens us up for talking to stake pools, stake pool operators and the like, to try to figure out. But like I said, this is kind of like a very internal thing that's going on right now, kind of like up here behind the scenes.
Very cool concept though. Very, very interesting concept. Okay, and the Card Wallet thing, I would look into that as well. I haven't heard of that one yet, but like you said, it's come out of the whole Occam ecosystem, so it's probably why I haven't heard of it quite yet. Now, in regards to the team, the people that are building this project and putting it all together, I've looked up on the DeFire website, and all I can find really is the advisors and the strategy board members. No developers and not even yourself. What's going on there?
What's the deal? We're a ghost team.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure if people have been using Occam recently. It's kind of gone through website revamp, which just happened a few days ago, and now we're kind of moving on to DeFire to revamp that entire website because we're doing like a logo refresh, and as well as some other like logo adjustments and overall website adjustments. And so we're going to be updating all the team and LinkedIn stuff. The team, how does that work? So what is on the website currently? If you navigate over to the DeFire website and then look at the team, you kind of see advisory board and strategy board, which is a similar thing to what we've kind of adopted from Occam, where Occam has their Occam Association, which is eventually, I think, going to be a DAO if I am knowledgeable of how that's going to work. But you have the Occam Association, which is like the team of consultants that we are, interacting with to kind of pass everything through, and they consist of a bunch of different, industry people that work at various different, corporations or work within the space or do trading or what have you. And so the team-wise, we draw on a lot of developers that we've pulled off of Occam that were initially working with Occam that we've now moved over to DeFire. Then we have some internal guys that are bouncing around between Occam and DeFire that are mainly kind of focusing on DeFire at the moment. And then we have one or two other groups of developers that we're also working with to facilitate a lot of the Ethereum stuff and some of the Haskell stuff. And that's what we've also been doing a lot of, is onboarding a lot of other developers, because we are basically going on a hiring spree, trying to onboard as many Haskell guys and Solidity guys as possible. I know I personally am going through the Plutus Pioneer program right now, the second cohort, and working through that. And so I've been in the Discord talking to a few people, trying to attract some talent because we're trying to staff up the DeFire team more, staff up Occam more, but also say, hey, we have a avenue for a lot of these developers that are coming out with these skills in Plutus and Haskell, and say, hey, we have access, a doorway into all these other projects that are potentially coming up, like Cardwell, like all these other projects that we're about to announce. We have an avenue for them to actually put their skills to use and potentially be hired and get a job out of this. And so I think that's another really good thing that we're trying to do, is provide a home and provide a means of an income for a lot of these people that are coming kind of out of Plutus. But like I said, with the team stuff, the website is being revamped, and hopefully I'll be an official employee at DeFire in due time.
Okay, brilliant. You're not official unless you're on the website.
Exactly, yeah.
It's really cool what you guys are doing in providing some of these opportunities for the developers that are going through the Plutus Pioneer program. It's I don't think there is a shortage of job offerings at the moment, though. But Yeah, there's so many people trying to start up projects on Cardano right now. So it's if you really want to get into programming and get into blockchain, becoming a Haskell Plutus developer is definitely a really good option right now, because they're in high demand and very hard to find. You guys are quite lucky that some of the Emurgo IOG developers came over to Occam and now working with DeFire as well. So that's kind of a really good, well, not really good, it's extremely advantageous to have that experience of developing for, I don't know, at least a year, 2 years already in the ecosystem, and then come over and build a project like this. That's really cool and really amazing.
It's been extremely helpful, and it is really nice to talk to them personally with reverse coding, because I'm also working on Haskell and Plutus in the background, just because it's an interesting thing for me to know, just as an engineer. And bouncing off those guys, it is honestly with Haskell, and I've done a few articles, or written up a few articles on Haskell and Plutus. I think once you kind of get around the learning curve of a functional language and just understand that everything is like a math equation, it does make a lot of sense, and it really helps me kind of streamline everything. And so it's a bit obtuse at first glance, but after kind of repetitions and practicing, it really does seem like a really interesting, really new and innovative way to kind of approach the whole smart contracts ecosystem. So I like it, at least.
Yeah, I think a lot of developers, especially Solidity developers at the moment, don't even know how the smart contracts work on Cardano yet. So just a little bit of an investigation, I think, would convert quite a few people. But we'll see. We'll see in time. So now the token, the cSwaps. How do you pronounce this? cSwap?
cSwap, yeah, cSwap, CWAP, yeah.
Yep, it's pretty much like swap. If you slur all the letters together quickly, I think it's
swap. Yeah.
Swap token. It's actually pretty clever, I thought, because essentially it's what you're doing. You're swapping your tokens for something else. Now, what's the utility behind this? Is it purely just for the fees, the liquidity pool mining, or what's the idea and concept behind that? And is there any governance or DAO behind the token as well?
Governance is more something that we're still working on. I think that the immediate focus is to just get all the DEXes, all the DEX handlers and all that code working before we start to migrate into DAO territory. But that is much more of an Occam question. Occam has their DAO and they're kind of migrating towards that in the long term. For us, it's more of a question of, hey, can we actually just get this, can we get all these DEXs aggregated together? Can we get everything set up? Now, the question of the cSwap token is, I think, very interesting because it's all about order flow origination and referral rewards. And so if you think about it in terms of, depending on however many tokens that you have, different tiers of tokens, then you are receiving rewards based on kind of where those flows are originating from. And so if you have higher volumes coming from certain party sources, and those sources are staking, X amount of cSwap tokens, they're going to be entitled to receive the rewards based off of all those trading fees. And this is kind of things that we are mousing around because it's like, okay, if we do not have DeFire trading fees, then we are still going to encounter DEX fees. Now, so what do we do with those DEX fees? Is there a way to turn them back and then give them back as a recompense to people that are using our DeFire router, or that are sending orders through the router itself? And so we're trying to figure out the specific math behind rewards and how that's going to work. But essentially, the token is going to be used to just allow people to earn rewards based off of actually sending orders through. So it's a utility token because people are going to use it and they're going to ideally do the majority of their orders through DeFire, and then as a result, they're going to get rewards in the form of token rebates, as well as other things kind of going forward from the cSwap token. We're also kind of looking at a HODL tax, and this is kind of in the white paper, but that is also a thing that we're borrowing from Occam and from some other projects, and that's basically, so you staked your cSwap tokens. Should you decide to unstake them, there's going to be a little cast out, a small fee that's kind of taken out of the cSwap token, taken out of your total balance that is withdrawn, and that is going to be then returned to the pool of people that are then staking their tokens. So that's the simple kind of initial, at first glance, thinking of with the cSwap utility token.
Okay, brilliant. I'll post a link up to the white paper as well. So if people want to learn a little bit more about how the token and the tokenomics work, they can dive a little bit deeper. So how can people get their hands on the token at the moment?
Yes, so they have two options. They have hotbit.io, which is like a CEX version, and then Uniswap. And so those are the two avenues of purchase for the DeFire token. And then once Alonzo happens, I believe the thinking is to get Occam DEX rolled up as soon as possible, or we can start talking to whichever DEXes in order to get our token on Cardano DEXes, so people can avoid having to deal with the Ethereum fees if they're interacting on the Cardano side. So.
Yes, the last thing you want is people needing to pay gas fees on Ethereum. It's not a nice experience, especially if you're doing small trades. So I noticed that you guys do giveaways as well. Like I was on the Telegram group and I saw an announcement for giveaways. If people want to participate in that, are you going to have any more giveaways in the future?
Yes, we do them fairly often, every week or every few weeks on Twitter. We are kind of in the marketing phase now and really trying to get out. I think as of right now, we're going to release potentially the second edition the second version of the minimum viable product in a few hours. It's 08:30 here in Texas time, but we're looking at around like 11, like a few more hours until we actually come out with the second version of the MVP. And so we're trying to structure like rewards and kind of things or quizzes and things like that around cSwap and people getting to actually know the product and getting to a value of it, because having a working product, having a working demo for people to actually try out, I feel is a rather hot commodity or a rather rare commodity in the current space of things. So
that's really cool. I guess having it built on Ethereum at the moment allows you to do that, because you can actually deploy code and have it, I guess, working on a testnet. So I did see the demo video that you did and post on the Telegram group. So that was a really good overview of the interface and how it actually works. So this one here that you're releasing today is an actual physical one that people can log in on and actually play with. Right.
Yes.
Cool.
So there was some funny little things with the previous version. You had to send, it was like a minimum of like $50, but you couldn't send more than like 0.8 BTC. There was like some interesting nicks. There were some things that were going on with that, but that's, it's because it was like the very first thing. It's like, hey, we can actually send assets and swap assets. This does actually work. And so at the end of the day, the back end is what's going to be changing. The front end, for the most part, there's going to be UI tweaks here and there, but for the most part, the front end is going to stay the same. Whether we migrate from here, whether we're on Ethereum or whatever we migrate to Cardano, it's just the back end that's going to be adjusted based on the network. And that's I will say as a caveat, we are kind of we're kind of just looking at Ethereum long term and seeing what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to occur with Ethereum V2 or 2.0, whatever they want to call it, Arbitrum or all that, or Optimism. And so we're just focused on Cardano. But since we do have the working product on Ethereum, and eventually, whatever happens with Ethereum, with Optimism or with Arbitrum, or how that works, if they can manage to get the gas fee solved, we're also not necessarily ruling out Ethereum as an avenue for DeFire as well. And that's kind of going to be interesting because, say best of both worlds. We have Cardano and Ethereum, Ethereum with minimal gas fees, and then you have Cardano as well. And assuming Cardano doesn't do too much damage, or Cardano doesn't completely kill Ethereum, which it may or may not, you never know. But Ethereum does have a lot of infrastructure built on it. And so if we can kind of in lockstep with the bridge of ERC20 to CNT, the CNT to ERC20, with all that combined over the long run, we may have a good facilitation of infrastructure across both and allow kind of the two-way street of being able to build on both Cardano and then being able to build on Ethereum, or vice versa.
That's really cool. It'd be awesome to see if the two ecosystems could coexist, rather than one take over the other and wipe it out of existence. But coexisting and bringing in users from either ecosystem and I guess liquidity really from either ecosystem is actually a really cool thing. Right. How can people find out more about the project?
Definitely. I think the best thing to do is go to our Twitter, and that should be where is it? I think it's a DeFire Twitter. Let me see if I pull it up real quick. Yeah, it's going to be at DeFire_FI. So, and then our YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel is, I think, the official DeFire channel. Both of those, if you go to the Twitter or the channel and then any of the videos, the Twitter itself, it's going to have access to the Telegram, the Medium, and all of that, or the actual main website, DeFire, DEFIRE.FI is the project website, and that has all the links to everything else as well. So that's kind of the three main things I would point to.
Okay, brilliant. I'll post those up to the show notes for the audio podcast and in the video description on YouTube as well, so people can have access to that. So just look in the descriptions and you'll find that and be able to follow the project. Conor, it's been an absolute pleasure to actually get a better understanding of what DeFire is, how it works, and all the ins and outs of the project. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I think I'll have you on again in the future as well to get further updates on the project and find out a little bit more.
This has been awesome. I appreciate it, Peter. Thank you, man.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast.
Thank you, Conor, so much for joining me on this episode. And don't forget to check out the MVP, find out exactly how it works, and get that little bit of experience in the new and upcoming DeFi ecosystem for Cardano. That's getting really heated and really exciting at the moment. Make sure you check that out. Make sure you check out all the links down below as well for the links to DeFi, the project, to learn more about it, the cSwap token, and all that really cool stuff. Now, if you really like this type of content, please make sure you give us that thumbs up, click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you hear more from us real soon.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debating.